Have you ever worked so hard that you thought your bones might snap, only to realize your boss didn't even know your name? Imagine being an intern working endless nights, covering up your manager's mistakes, and suddenly discovering the entire company is built on lies. What would you do? Stay silent? Or risk everything to expose the truth? My name is Claire Summers, and when I was 22, I thought I had landed the opportunity of a lifetime. An internship at Brightwell & Company, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the city. The office was everything you'd expect from a glossy corporate dream. Glass walls, marble floors, a lobby that smelled like expensive cologne. But beneath the shine, there was a toxic workplace that no one warned me about. I wasn't just an intern. I was free labor, the girl who fetched coffee, stayed until midnight polishing PowerPoint slides, and received emails at 3 a.m. asking for just a small revision. But I was hungry for success, eager to prove myself. I told myself, it's only temporary. Endure the grind and it will pay off. What I didn't know was that behind the locked doors of Brightwell's executive offices, illegal practices were running unchecked, and I would soon be caught in the middle of it all. It started small, missing invoices, expense reports that didn't add up. At first, I thought it was just my exhaustion playing tricks on me. But then, I stumbled on something that made my stomach drop. Something that proved Brightwell & Company wasn't just overworking interns. They were stealing. And suddenly my late nights and coffee runs turned into something else. A dangerous game of survival. The first time I realized something was wrong, it was nearly midnight. The office was dark, except for the bluish glow of my laptop screen and the faint hum of the air conditioner overhead. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago, but I was still there. An intern, unpaid, desperate and bone-tired, trying to make sense of a stack of receipts and invoices my manager had tossed on my desk before leaving. Just reconcile these by tomorrow morning, she had said with a smile so fake it almost cracked her face. Shouldn't take you long. But it was taking long. Nothing matched. I rubbed my eyes scrolling through spreadsheets. Line after line of expenses, travel, client dinners, luxury hotels. But when I checked the client list, some of these names didn't even exist. Hotel Venice, $4,920. Private wine tasting, $3,200. Transportation for client, $7,850. I frowned. Who was approving this? And why were the receipts all in cash? At first, I told myself it was none of my business. I was just an intern. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The expenses were all signed off by the same person, Mr. Jonathan Brightwell, the CEO himself. The next morning, I brought the folder to my manager, Lisa. She was in her early 30s, sharp suits, sharp smile, and a way of talking that made you feel 2 inches tall. Lisa, I think there might be a mistake, I said softly, sliding the papers onto her desk. These expenses don't match the client list. And look, I pointed at one invoice. This company doesn't even exist. Her smile disappeared. She closed the folder with a snap, like a judge slamming a gavel. Claire, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You're here to learn, not to investigate. Do you understand? I swallowed hard. But. No buts. Do your work. Stay in your lane. She leaned in closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. If you want a future here, you'll forget what you just saw. For the next week I tried. I really did. I buried myself in meaningless tasks, making coffee runs, fixing slides, taking notes in meetings I barely understood. But the folder burned in my mind like a brand. And then something happened that forced me to confront it again. It was Friday evening. Everyone was buzzing about the firm's quarterly party at an upscale rooftop bar. I hadn't been invited, of course. Interns didn't get invitations. But as I packed up my things, I overheard 2 senior associates whispering near the break room. Jonathan's got it covered. Same deal as last time. Seriously? Another shell company. They both laughed. Shell company. My pulse quickened. I pretended to shuffle papers so I could listen. Yeah, he's funneling the money through a fake contractor again. You know, just in case the auditors get nosy. And the interns clean it all up, huh? They laughed again, grabbed their coats and left. I stood frozen, the weight of their words sinking in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. This was fraud. And I was already knee-deep in it. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in my tiny studio apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds. If I kept quiet, maybe I could finish my internship, get a letter of recommendation, and move on. But if I exposed this, I'd be going against the CEO of one of the most powerful firms in the city. Who would believe an intern over him? Still, the thought of letting it go made me sick. I thought about my father, who had lost his job years ago when the company he worked for collapsed in a financial scandal. I thought about my mother working 2 jobs just to put me through college. No, I couldn't stay silent. But I had to be smart. So I began collecting evidence. At first, it was little things, screenshots of emails, copies of invoices, photographs of receipts left carelessly on desks. I stored everything on a hidden USB drive. I kept tape to the bottom of my drawer. Every day I played the obedient intern, smiling, nodding, fetching coffee. And every night, I became a detective piecing together the puzzle of Brightwell and Company's corruption. It was terrifying. My heart raced every time I plugged in the USB. Every time I slipped a paper into my bag. One night, as I was sneaking a copy of a document from the printer, Lisa walked in. "Still here?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. My throat went dry. The paper was still warm in my hand. Yes," I stammered. "Just finishing up." She stared at me for a moment, then smiled that thin, sharp smile. "Good. Keep working hard. Ambition will take you far here." As she left, I exhaled shakily. She didn't know. Not yet. Weeks passed and my evidence grew. Patterns emerged, millions of dollars siphoned through fake companies, funneled into offshore accounts. It was bigger than I ever imagined. But the closer I got, the more dangerous it became. One evening, I returned to my desk to find my drawer slightly ajar. The USB drive was gone. My blood turned to ice. Someone knew. The sight of that open drawer was like a punch in the stomach. The USB was gone. My secret, my hours of carefully collected evidence, vanished. I sat frozen at my desk, my mind racing. Who took it? Lisa? One of the associates? Or worse, Jonathan Brightwell himself? The office was empty except for the faint hum of the printers in sleep mode. My reflection stared back at me from the glossy surface of my laptop screen. Pale, wide-eyed, terrified. I forced myself to breathe. Panicking wouldn't help. I had to think. If they knew I was digging, I was finished. The next morning, Lisa called me into her office. Her tone was honey-sweet, but her eyes were cold. "Claire, you've been working very hard. Too hard, maybe. You're just an intern. You don't need to stay so late." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I just want to do my best." She leaned back in her chair, studying me like a hawk studies prey. "Good. Because in this company, loyalty is everything. You understand." I swallowed. "Of course." Her smile widened. "Excellent. Now go get me a latte." As I walked out, my hands trembled. That wasn't just small talk. That was a warning. Over the next week, strange things started happening. My access card suddenly stopped working for certain floors. When I asked IT, they told me it must be a glitch. Important documents I had filed went missing. And when I asked about them, Lisa snapped. "Are you accusing us of losing your precious paperwork?" Then came the rumors. Whispered conversations stopped when I entered the break room. 2 interns I barely knew suddenly started avoiding me, like I carried some contagious disease. And then the ultimate blow. I received an email from HR scheduling a performance review. I was an unpaid intern. Interns didn't get performance reviews. The meeting was brutal. A panel of HR reps sat across from me, their faces expressionless. "Claire, we've received reports that you've been overstepping," one of them said. "Accessing files beyond your clearance. Questioning senior staff. Creating a hostile environment." My jaw dropped. "That's not true." They cut me off. "We take these allegations seriously. This is a professional workplace. If you want a career here, you'll need to adjust your behavior." It was a setup. They were building a case against me. I left the room shaking, my cheeks burning with humiliation. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the city skyline through the cracked window. I felt trapped. They had the power, the money, the influence. I was just an intern with no voice. But then I remembered something. The USB wasn't my only copy. Weeks ago, I had backed up some of the files on a cloud drive, encrypted, hidden under a fake project folder. Relief surged through me like a drug. They thought they had silenced me, but I still had the evidence. The next day, I went back to work, pretending to be obedient. I smiled when Lisa barked orders, laughed at jokes I didn't find funny, and kept my head down. But behind the mask, I was planning. If I went to the authorities now, it would be my word against theirs. They'd bury me under lawsuits and smear campaigns. I needed more. Something undeniable. So I started looking for the crown jewel, the one document, the one email, the one recording that could bring Brightwell and Company crashing down. Opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, as I delivered files to the executive floor, I passed by the boardroom. The door was slightly ajar, and voices drifted out. "The auditors are getting suspicious," a man said. "Relax," Jonathan Brightwell's voice replied, smooth and confident. "We've buried them before. We'll bury them again. That intern doesn't know anything." My heart nearly stopped. They were talking about me. I pressed myself against the wall, phone trembling in my hand as I hit record. "If this leaks, we're finished," another voice said. "It won't leak," Jonathan snapped. "Because if anyone tries, we'll ruin them. Do you understand? Ruin." I ended the recording and slipped away, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had it. Proof. But I also knew something else. They wouldn't stop until I was destroyed. That weekend, my phone rang while I was grocery shopping. An unknown number. "Claire Summers," a man's voice said. "Yes. This is Detective Harris with the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to speak with you regarding Brightwell and Company." I froze in the middle of the cereal aisle, clutching my basket. How did they know? Had someone tipped them off? Or was this another trap? I stood frozen in the cereal aisle, the phone pressed against my ear, my pulse thundering in my temples. Detective Harris. Financial Crimes Unit. Could have been salvation. Or it could have been the trap that ended me. "Miss Summers," the man repeated. I forced myself to breathe. "Yes, this is Claire. We're conducting an ongoing investigation into Brightwell and Company. We believe you may have information valuable to our case." I swallowed hard, staring at the shelf of Cheerios like it held the answers to my future. How did you get my number?" "Anonymous tip," he replied smoothly. "My mint spoon." "An anonymous tip? Who? Lisa? One of the associates? Or someone inside the company trying to use me as bait?" I'll need to call you back," I whispered and hung up before he could say more. My hands were trembling so hard that the phone nearly slipped from my fingers. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, curtains drawn, laptop open on my knees. Detective Harris could be real. But if he was, that meant the authorities were already circling Brightwell and Company. And if he wasn't, then the company was testing me. Either way, I couldn't go alone. So I did the unthinkable. I reached out for help. Her name was Naomi Park, a junior analyst who had joined the company 6 months earlier. We'd bonded over late-night ramen cups and sarcastic jokes about Lisa's impossible demands. Naomi wasn't like the others. She still had a soul. I texted her. "Need to talk. Confidential. Can I trust you?" The 3 dots blinked for what felt like hours before her reply came. "Yes." "Where?" We met at a dingy coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. The kind of place with flickering lights and cracked leather booths, where no one asked questions. Naomi slid into the seat across from me, her expression tense. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then pulled out my phone and showed her the recording from the boardroom. Her eyes widened. "Holy Claire, do you realize what this is?" "Proof," I whispered. "But I can't do this alone. They're watching me. They're already trying to shut me down." Naomi looked around, lowering her voice. "I've seen things too. Transactions that didn't make sense. Reports that got deleted. I thought I was imagining it, but..." She exhaled shakily. "You're right. They're dirty." Relief surged through me. I wasn't alone anymore. Together we formed a plan. Step 1. Confirm if Detective Harris was real. Naomi had a cousin in the police department. She agreed to reach out discreetly. Step 2. Duplicate the evidence. We encrypted the files, uploaded them to multiple drives, and set up an auto-send feature in case anything happened to us. Step 3. Dig deeper. We needed the smoking gun. Days blurred into nights as we worked in secret. We pretended to be dutiful employees by day, but by night we combed through servers, printed out documents, and pieced together the skeleton of Brightwell's empire of fraud. The more we uncovered, the more dangerous it became. One evening, Naomi's cousin confirmed it. Detective Harris was real. He'd been building a case against Brightwell for months, but the company's lawyers kept stonewalling him. My chest tightened with a mix of fear and hope. If we could deliver the files, Harris could bring them down. But Brightwell wasn't stupid. He could smell a threat. The next morning, security guards showed up at the office. They were upgrading protocols, they said. Suddenly, random bag checks became routine. Hallways had cameras I'd never noticed before. And then the nightmare. Naomi was called into Lisa's office. She didn't come out for 2 hours. When she did, her face was pale and drawn. "They know something," she whispered to me in the break room, her hands trembling as she gripped her coffee cup. "They asked me about you. About late nights missing files. Claire, they know." My blood ran cold. That night, I dreamed of my father again. The day he came home, eyes hollow, after his company had collapsed in scandal. I remembered the way my mother had tried to smile while pawning her wedding ring just to keep the lights on. I couldn't let Brightwell destroy more lives. The next morning, I walked into the office with a new resolve burning in my chest. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. The office had never felt more suffocating. Every glance lingered too long. Every laugh seemed to echo with hidden meaning. Naomi and I moved like ghosts, pretending everything was normal while our nerves screamed otherwise. But paranoia has a way of bleeding through no matter how careful you are. It started with little things. One morning I found a sticky note on my desk that simply read, "Stop." The handwriting was jagged, rushed. No signature. Another day, Naomi texted me, "Don't come to the server room tonight. Too many eyes." I trusted her. I had to. She was my only ally in a company that felt more like a predator than a workplace. But trust can be the most dangerous gamble of all. A week later, Naomi didn't show up at our usual coffee shop. No text, no call. Just silence. I waited an hour, staring at the rain-streaked window, my stomach twisting into knots. Finally, I left, convincing myself she'd been stuck at work. The next morning, I got my answer. Lisa summoned me into her office, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Naomi was there, sitting stiffly in a chair across from Lisa's desk, her eyes bloodshot, her hands gripping a tissue. "Claire," Lisa purred. "Naomi has told us some very concerning things." My heart stopped. Naomi wouldn't. She couldn't. But she did. She said you've been sneaking into restricted files, spreading rumors, trying to damage the company's reputation. Lisa's gaze was triumphant, like a cat cornering a mouse. "That's very serious, Claire." I turned to Naomi, desperate. "That's not true. Tell her." Naomi's lips trembled. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. They know everything. I didn't have a choice." The room tilted. My chest ached like someone had punched a hole through it. Lisa leaned back in her chair, enjoying the spectacle. "You see, Claire? This is what happens when you play detective in a place you don't belong." For the next 2 days, they watched me like hawks. My computer access was restricted. HR sent me final warnings for infractions I hadn't committed. My badge worked only for the intern floor. It was a cage, invisible but unbreakable. And Naomi, she avoided me completely. No texts, no glances, just silence. The betrayal cut deeper than Lisa's threats ever could. But they had underestimated one thing. I still had the recording. The boardroom meeting, Jonathan's own words promising to ruin anyone who exposed him. That file was my last weapon. I uploaded it to a hidden drive and scheduled it to autosend to Detective Harris in 48 hours. If anything happened to me, he'd get it. But the company wasn't done playing games. Friday afternoon, Lisa asked me to stay late. "Jonathan wants to see you," she said sweetly. "Big opportunity. Don't be nervous." My gut twisted. Jonathan Brightwell, the man himself. At 9 p.m., the building was nearly empty. I took the elevator to the top floor, my heart pounding in my ears. The doors opened to the executive suite, silent and gleaming like a predator's lair. Jonathan was waiting in the boardroom. He was taller than I expected, his suit immaculate, his smile practiced. But his eyes were cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who had built an empire on fear. "Claire," he said warmly, spreading his hands. "Our star intern. Sit down." I sat, my palms sweating against the polished mahogany table. He studied me for a moment, then leaned forward. "You've been very busy. Too busy. Asking questions. Collecting things that don't belong to you." My throat tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." He chuckled softly. "Come now. Don't insult me." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, grainy security footage of me sneaking papers into my bag, screenshots of files I'd accessed at night, even a blurry picture of me and Naomi at the coffee shop. My blood ran cold. "You see," he said smoothly, "we know everything, and we could ruin you with this. Expelled from every firm in the city, reputation destroyed before you even begin." He paused, his smile widening. "Or you can join us." I blinked. "What?" "You're smart, resourceful, ruthless when you need to be. Qualities I value. Work with me, and your future will be secure. Fight me and," his voice hardened, "I'll bury you." The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. For the first time I realized I wasn't just fighting to expose Brightwell. I was fighting for my soul. That night I walked home under the city's neon glow, Jonathan's words echoing in my head. Join us, or be buried. It was the ultimate trap. And now I had to choose. The following weeks inside Stratosphere Solutions felt like walking across a battlefield where every step could trigger a landmine. Ever since Emily had slipped those damning documents into her encrypted drive, every sound in the office seemed sharper. Every glance from management carried a trace of suspicion. But Emily had learned to wear a mask. By day she was the same overworked, invisible intern, shuffling papers, brewing coffee, typing late into the night. By night, however, she was something else entirely. A shadow peeling back the company's secrets layer by layer. The first leak. It started small. Emily anonymously dropped a single piece of information to a financial watchdog forum. A post buried between threads about tax evasion rumors and corporate gossip. The file detailed a suspicious transaction chain involving offshore accounts. Within hours it sparked replies. This looks like classic laundering. Someone needs to dig deeper into Stratosphere Solutions. If this is real, it's massive. Emily smiled to herself in her tiny apartment, laptop screen glowing against the darkness. The trap had been set. Tension in the office. By the following Monday, whispers filled the halls. Emily overheard managers muttering about an article in an independent financial blog. Stratosphere Solutions linked to possible laundering scheme. Her supervisor, Linda, the same woman who once called her just coffee-fetching material, was visibly rattled, snapping at employees over minor mistakes. During a tense morning meeting, the CFO barked. "CFO, we're being watched. Somebody leaked. If I find out who it was." The room went dead silent. Emily lowered her gaze, hiding the fire of satisfaction in her eyes. The gaslighting begins. The executives began employing classic toxic workplace tactics to regain control. Extra workload. Emily suddenly found herself buried in meaningless spreadsheets meant to keep her busy. Public shaming. At meetings, they called out her smallest errors, humiliating her in front of the team. Isolation. Coworkers were told not to trust her. Whispers followed her like a shadow. But Emily had anticipated all of this. Instead of breaking her, it fueled her resolve. A dangerous encounter. One evening, as Emily was leaving the office after midnight, she noticed a black SUV idling by the curb. A tinted window slid down just enough for a man in a dark suit to speak. "Man, you're working late. Be careful on your way home." Then the SUV pulled off. Emily froze, heart hammering in her chest. They suspected her. But fear quickly turned to defiance. If they wanted a fight, they had just guaranteed they'd get one. The master plan unfolds. Emily knew one leak wasn't enough. She needed to hit them from multiple angles at once: financial regulators, investigative journalists, even social media. She began crafting an information package. Transaction records. Fake contracts. Whistleblower statements she forged using anonymized templates. Each piece was cross-verified, time-stamped, and linked to her original files. If she dropped it all at once, the company would implode overnight. But she wasn't ready to strike yet. She wanted them to squirm first. Seeds of chaos. Over the next weeks, she leaked bits and pieces strategically. A file to a journalist at the Financial Beacon. A spreadsheet to an anonymous activist group online. A cryptic tip to a podcaster who specialized in exposing corruption. Every leak built momentum. News outlets began circling. Anonymous Twitter accounts amplified the story. Stratosphere's name started trending alongside the hashtag toxic workplace and hashtag corporate fraud. Inside the office, paranoia spread like wildfire. Security was tightened. Employees were interrogated. Whispered accusations flew from desk to desk. And through it all, Emily remained invisible, the dutiful intern, quietly stoking the flames of the fire she had started. The climax approaches. Late one night, Emily sat at her kitchen table, her wall covered in sticky notes and printouts. One note stood out, circled in red. Annual shareholder meeting 3 weeks. That was it. That was where she'd strike her final blow. A public gathering. Executives forced to speak. Cameras rolling. Reporters present. She would drop everything that night, every document, every email, every financial record. At the exact moment the company was most vulnerable. Her revenge wouldn't just be whispered in dark corners of the internet. It would be broadcasted to the world. And there would be no turning back. The morning of the annual shareholder meeting arrived like the calm before a storm. Emily barely slept. She sat on the edge of her bed, suit jacket draped over her shoulders, a USB drive hidden inside her pocket, the weapon that would detonate Stratosphere Solutions from the inside out. The atmosphere inside the grand hall. The venue was a lavish hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, tables draped in white cloth, cameras set up along the back row. Executives strutted in like royalty, their smiles tight, rehearsed. They knew the press was circling, but they were confident they could smooth things over. Shareholders sat with wary expressions, already uneasy after weeks of bad press. Emily slipped in quietly, her intern badge granting her backstage access. Nobody noticed her. That was her strength. She was invisible until she chose not to be. The speeches begin. The CEO, Mr. Harrington, took the stage. His voice was calm, reassuring, the way a seasoned manipulator always sounded. CEO. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you've heard rumors, unsubstantiated claims, but rest assured, Stratosphere Solutions remains strong, ethical, and committed to excellence. Applause echoed, but it was half-hearted. Cameras zoomed in on his face, reporters scribbled notes. Emily's hand brushed against the USB in her pocket. Her pulse quickened. The technical glitch. She had timed everything. During the third quarter presentation, when Linda connected her laptop to display earnings growth charts, Emily triggered a remote upload from her phone. Instead of graphs, the projector flickered, then suddenly displayed scanned documents. Emails ordering employees to falsify records. Transaction trails leading to offshore accounts. Memos approving illegal cost-cutting measures. The room went silent. Gasps erupted. Shareholders leaned forward. Reporters scrambled for photos. Panic erupts. CFO shouting, "Turn it off. Shut it down." But every attempt to disconnect the laptop failed. Emily had locked the system. One by one, more files appeared. Whistleblower notes, recorded calls, charts of money laundering cycles. The CEO's face turned ashen. Linda fumbled with the cables, sweat dripping down her temple. Emily steps into the light. For weeks she had been invisible. But now, Emily rose from her seat near the back and walked steadily toward the front. Every step echoed. Every eye followed her. She stopped just short of the stage and spoke, voice steady but sharp as a blade. Emily. For months I watched this company exploit its workers, bury the truth and destroy lives. I was told I was nothing but an intern, coffee-fetching material. But I've seen everything. And now so has everyone else. The crowd erupted. Some shareholders cheered. Others shouted angrily at the executives. Cameras swung toward Emily, capturing her face for the first time. The collapse. Journalists began live tweeting. Intern exposes Stratosphere Solutions on stage, shocking documents shown at shareholder meeting. Hashtag toxic workplace now trending worldwide. Shareholders demanded answers. Some stormed toward the stage, waving contracts and shouting for refunds. Police officers, already alerted by the activist group Emily had tipped off, entered the hall. They pushed through the chaos and moved directly toward the CEO and CFO. "Officer, Mr. Harrington, you're under investigation for financial fraud. Step aside." The once untouchable executives were now pale, cornered rats in a cage of their own making. The aftermath of the strike. As the officers escorted the executives away, Emily felt an overwhelming calm wash over her. She wasn't just an intern anymore. She was the whistleblower who took down a corporation. Outside, cameras flashed as journalists swarmed her, shouting questions. Reporter: "What made you come forward?" Emily, smiling faintly, "Because silence only protects the abusers. And I refused to be silent." The silence after the storm. The ballroom had descended into chaos. Cameras flashing, executives shouting, shareholders demanding answers. But as the police led the CEO and CFO away in handcuffs, a hush settled over the room. Everyone turned back to Emily. For the first time since she had started at Stratosphere Solutions, she wasn't invisible. She was the center of gravity in a collapsing universe. Media frenzy. By the next morning, her name was everywhere. Intern exposes billion-dollar fraud. Corporate giant crumbles. David versus Goliath. Whistleblower turns the tables on #toxic workplace. Emily Carter, the woman who brought Stratosphere Solutions to its knees. On social media, hashtags trended globally. #toxic workplace. #corporate revenge. #whistleblower hero. #justice served. Thousands of employees from other companies commented, sharing their own stories of exploitation, inspired by Emily's courage. The arrests multiply. It didn't stop with Harrington and the CFO. Federal agents raided Stratosphere's headquarters that very week. Boxes of files were carried out, computers seized. Senior managers were questioned, some arrested on the spot. Linda, once Emily's arrogant, condescending supervisor, was photographed being escorted out of the building, face hidden in shame. Emily's struggle. But Emily's victory came at a cost. Whistleblowing meant she could never return to a normal corporate life. Her face was everywhere. Recruiters hesitated, some feared her boldness, others saw her as a liability. Some nights she lay awake wondering, had she destroyed her future along with Stratosphere's? But every time doubt crept in, she remembered the faces of the overworked interns, the employees whose voices had been silenced. She hadn't just destroyed a company, she had given others a voice. The unexpected ally. Weeks later, Emily received a call from a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting whistleblowers. They offered her a fellowship, researching, mentoring, and advocating for others trapped in toxic workplaces. Director: "We need people like you, Emily. Brave enough to speak truth when it matters most." Emily hesitated only a moment before accepting. Her transformation. From that moment, Emily was no longer the invisible intern. She became a speaker at universities, a guest on news panels, even wrote op-eds about labor rights and corporate corruption. Her story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. The closing lesson. Months later, she stood before a packed auditorium, sharing her journey. She ended with the same words she had spoken on that stage during the shareholder meeting. "Emily, silence only protects the abusers. If you're living through a toxic workplace, speak, fight, resist. You're not alone." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras captured her face again. Not the nervous intern, but a woman transformed. Final hook for audience interaction. Emily looked directly into the camera lens one last time. "Emily, have you ever experienced a toxic workplace? If you had the chance to expose the truth, would you take it? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story." A different life. 12 months had passed since the shareholder meeting that shook the corporate world. Chicago's skyline looked the same, but for Emily, everything had changed. She no longer rode the crowded train at dawn to brew coffee in a sterile office. Instead, her mornings began with emails from journalists, invitations to conferences, and messages from strangers thanking her for her courage. Stratosphere Solutions, a ghost of the past. The once mighty company no longer existed. Its glass tower, once a symbol of power, now stood dark and empty. For lease signs covered the lobby doors. The company's name had become synonymous with fraud and exploitation, taught in business ethics courses as a warning. Executives were still entangled in court battles. Some faced prison time. Others disappeared from public life entirely. Emily's mission. Emily had transformed her pain into purpose. She now worked full-time with the nonprofit Whistleblower Protection Group. She mentored interns, spoke at seminars, and testified before government panels about labor rights and corporate accountability. In one interview, she said, "Emily, I was just an intern when it happened, but you don't need power to fight back. You need truth. Truth is stronger than fear." Personal growth. Emily also began to heal personally. She started journaling, reconnecting with friends she had pushed away during those dark months, even traveling. Something she never thought she could afford or deserve. She wasn't defined by trauma anymore. She was defined by resilience. The ripple effect. Her story had inspired a wave of whistleblowers across the country. A nurse exposed hospital negligence. A junior engineer revealed unsafe practices at a tech firm. A warehouse worker leaked evidence of wage theft. Each one mentioned Emily's story as the spark. She wasn't just a survivor of a toxic workplace. She was the catalyst for a movement. A quiet moment. One evening, Emily stood by Lake Michigan, the wind carrying the scent of autumn. She closed her eyes, remembering the frightened intern who once felt invisible. She whispered to herself, "Emily, you did it. You turned silence into something louder than their lies." Final words to the audience. Emily's gaze shifted to the camera, her voice steady, heartfelt. "Emily, a year ago I was just another intern in a toxic workplace, afraid to speak up. Today I stand here free and stronger. Remember this. No matter how small you feel, your voice matters. If you faced a toxic workplace, share your story in the comments. Your courage might inspire someone else, just like mine once did." The screen faded to black, leaving the audience with both closure and a spark to carry forward.